Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at the Classic Collection, and the Classic Collection gives us lots of new and powerful tools to upgrade and iterate on some current and existing decks. And in today's video I'm going to be upgrading and iterating upon the Bond of Bravery deck. So the Bond of Bravery deck, like the Bond of Friendship deck, is still going to be a very strong deck, if not one of the better decks going into the Classic Collection format, just because what it's doing is very, very powerful, and it's very simple and easy to understand, with a lot of new tools being added into the mix to make it even stronger than it was before. So essentially what the Bond of Bravery deck is doing is it's another chip style deck where you're trying to aggress with your champions and rookies to try to deal as much damage as quickly and consistently as you possibly can, and then when you feel like you're ready, you're just going to go up into Bond of Bravery, thanks to the Warp, thanks to the Tai, to try to close out the game with, or you could even try playing it a little bit differently and use a Bond of Bravery to try to chip and then end the game with your champions and your rookies. So there's just lots of depth and diversity on how you could play the deck, just because the simple theme of chip and aggress is just that good for this style of deck to be using. So without further ado, onto the deck profile. Starting with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Koromon. So Koromon is a really fantastic card for this deck just because it's acting as a very solid card draw engine for the deck. So because we are a rookie or champion rush style deck, we're not necessarily going to be drawing a lot through evolution because, well, we don't have a whole lot of evolution to actually draw through, so having an alternative way to try to draw cards and keep our hand as healthy as possible is really good, and we have no better draw engine than Koromon, because Koromon states when attacking once per turn, if this Digimon has Greymon or Agumon in its name, then we get to draw 1 card, and most of the cards we want to try to aggress with are Greymons, making BT05 Koromon one of the easiest cards for us to use to try to draw additional cards with. And then as far as the 5th Digitama of the deck goes, it could really be anything you want it to be, but I'm going to choose to use 1 copy of DemiMeramon just because this DemiMeramon is really good for aggressing onto the opponent's security. So it rewards us when we're actually attacking the opponent by giving us plus 1000 DP, making it just a very easy DP boost for a lot of our Digimon to try to take advantage of. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Agumon. So this is the BT01 version of Agumon, and this Agumon is really good because it's going to be acting as one of the primary ways we're going to try to dig out our tamers. So what this card is doing more specifically is it has an on-play ability where we get to check the top 5 cards of our deck and then add any tamer among them into our hand, and the rest go to the bottom. So what makes this card really powerful is the fact that it's not even color specific on the tamer we could grab, so we could even think about running some off-color tamers, making this a really good card to try to find our tamers. And believe me, in this deck we really do need to see our tamers in order to be as powerful and as efficient as we possibly can with our cards. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Agumon Expert. So Agumon Expert is an absolutely insane card for this deck to be running because, well, we're for the most part an Agumon-based deck. So what this card is doing is it has another on-play ability where we get to return 1 Digimon with Agumon in its name from our trash into our hand. So this is very, very powerful because we could grab basically any of our rookies, including Agumon Expert, and then we could also grab our level 7, which is Agumon Bond of Bravery, which has Agumon in its name, making this one of the best cards to reuse and recycle any of our Agumon cards. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon. So this is the BT06 Agumon, and this is one of the most important Agumons in the whole deck because it is directly synergizing with Bond of Bravery. So it has 2 abilities, a native ability and an inheritable ability. Its native ability states during all turns, so once per turn, when we play a tamer with Tai Kamiya in its name, then we get to gain 1 memory. So this is really powerful and really important because it makes playing our Tais as efficient as we possibly can, and if this card is passively sitting on the field and the opponent checks a Tai in security, then the ability also will still trigger, and that could be really powerful and really annoying for the opponent to deal with. And then on top of that, the primary use of this card is going to be for its inheritable for our Agumon Bond of Bravery, because its inheritable states that during your turn, while this Digimon is Agumon Bond of Bravery, then it gets Security Attack +1, allowing our Bond of Bravery to deal even more damage than he normally would, allowing us to try to, well, close out the game as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can, thanks to this inheritable. Next up, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Agumon. So this Agumon is the Classic Collection version of Agumon, and this Agumon is another absolutely insane card for the deck to be using to try to dig out our parts and pieces. So similar to the Gabumon, this Agumon is doing the exact same thing, where it has a nice inheritable ability of when attacking once per turn, you get to check the top 3 cards of your deck and add 1 Tamer or 1 Digimon with Agumon in its name from among them and put it into our hand, and the rest go to the bottom of our deck. So this is really important because we could find our Agumon Bond of Bravery, we could find all of our other Agumons in case we're trying to dig out our cards to try to keep up the pressure, and we even can use this card to try to dig out any of our Tamers, again, not specifically locked to a single color, in order to try to find our parts and pieces and set up as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can, so we could try to aggress, and this card is definitely incentivizing more of this Champion Rush style deck, because we want to try to trigger this ability as early and consistently and repeatedly as much as we can to try to get as much value out of it as we possibly can. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Agumon. So this is the promo version of Agumon, or a promo version of Agumon, and this Agumon is really good for trying to DP boost our champions. So what this card is doing is it has a nice inheritable ability where during your turn, while this Digimon has Greymon in its name, it gets plus 2000 DP. So a lot of our champions are going to be Greymon-based cards, so this is just an absolutely insane card at trying to make our champions as strong as they possibly can, so that way they have a higher chance of success at living through multiple security checks or just one security check. So just that DP boost that makes this card really, really good, but you could reduce this card by 1 and play 4 of the other Agumon because we're not running that many Greymons, and we still have ways to DP boost our champions, but it's up to you on how you want to change the deck. But I do feel like this Agumon is still just a really good card to be running, just for that DP boost potential. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Agumon. So this is the starter deck version of Agumon coming from the Gallantmon starter deck, and this card is very similar to DemiMeramon, where it has a very powerful inheritable ability to DP boost our Digimon when we're attacking the opponent's security. So its ability states that while this Digimon is attacking a player, then it gets plus 2000 DP, so it's just a more generic way of giving whatever Digimon we're using plus 2000 DP. So between this and the promo Agumon, we have lots of different ways to try to make our champions as strong as we possibly can. But speaking of our champions, next I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agunimon. So Agunimon is an absolutely insane card for this deck to be running because he's mostly going to be acting as an alternate win condition for the deck. So what's making this card so powerful and making him an alternate win condition is the fact that he is a hybrid Digimon. Hybrids tend to win games because there is this uninteractive element where you could just Digivolve him on top of a Tamer because there's not much Tamer-based interactions in the game. So you could just hold on to a Tamer, break all of the opponent's security, then figure out a way to Digivolve into a Agunimon and swing for game. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Greymon. So this is the promo Greymon, and this Greymon is an absolutely insane card for this deck to be running because it is one of the most powerful level 4s that we could think about utilizing. So what this card is doing that's making him so strong is the fact that he has this great ability where during your turn, while this Digimon has Agumon in its Digivolution source, then it gains security attack +1. So ideally you're going to want to use this Greymon with the DP boost to Agumons, so that way we could try to make him 7 or even 8,000 when he's going to be swinging, and that's just a very powerful level 4 to be swinging. 2 checks 7 to 8,000 is just that good of an ability to use to try to chip out the opponent as quickly as we possibly can. Even if he doesn't get the 2 checks, it's still just a very strong card to be utilizing because of that potential. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of GeoGreymon. So GeoGreymon is another Greymon, and what's making this card so good is the fact that it's, well, a security Digimon. So it's just adding to the potential that our security is actually going to be a threat for the opponent to deal with, because when its security ability activates, it gets to be played onto the field for free, and when it's played onto the field, we get its on-play ability to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less. So not only are we getting a free body that could potentially delete one of the opponent's Digimon just from the security check, but we're also getting a body that could delete one of the opponent's Digimon through its own ability, making it just a very powerful card to be playing around with, especially if the opponent is trying to aggress onto us. Then this card could just come out and start pressuring the opponent and potentially win games because they could try to damage race us, and then the security Greymon could put us at a higher damage count. Next, on to the Ultimates, I'm going to be running 2 copies of SkullGreymon. So this is the Classic Collection version of SkullGreymon, and this card is another really powerful card for the deck to be using, mostly for some chip potential. So what this card is doing is, yes, it is a purple card, but it could evolve off of a red at level 4, so we could utilize our other cards to be able to play this card. So what this card is doing is it has security tech +1, so it's going to be already a really good chip card to try to deal as much damage as quickly as we possibly can, and it is a Greymon by name, so it does have some of our Greymon-based synergies to interact with. And then, unfortunately, what this card is doing is at the end of the attack, we have to delete this Digimon, but that's okay because most of the time we're expecting it to die in the security at some point. Even though we'd like it to live, we'd like it to at least try to get the 2 checks, but if it dies, we don't necessarily care because it has an on-delete ability to replace itself where we get to play 1 Agumon from our trash suspended for free, allowing him to just, well, keep up the pressure because we're going to get a body for his deletion. The important thing to note is this is just Agumon, not Agumon in its name, so it only is going to interact with our rookies, which is okay because all of our Agumons are just that good, and we do get their on-play abilities if they have any. So this is just another very powerful card for the deck to be playing with, mostly because of that chip potential. And then lastly, on to our Megas, I'm only going to be running 4 copies of Agumon Bond of Bravery. So Agumon Bond of Bravery is just the powerhouse backbone of the deck. Most of the time, we're going to try winning the game off of him, and because of him, just because this card is, well, really, really strong. So what this card is doing is he is a level 7 red Digimon that we could warp up into thanks to our Tamer, so we don't necessarily need to worry about Digivolving all the way up into him. And then he has 2 abilities of his own. He has a when attacking ability where if we have a Tamer in play, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 13,000 DP or less, so basically anything that's not a level 7, and we get rewarded for deleting the opponent's Digimon because of his secondary ability, where during your turn, once per turn, when an opponent's Digimon is deleted, you get to trash the top card of the opponent's security stack. So that is just a very powerful ability, bypassing what they could possibly have set up in their security, because it's just straight up trashing and not checking it. And then on top of that, he's going to deal his own security damage, on top of the fact that we could potentially pair him up with BT06 Agumon for 2 security checks. So he could potentially hit for 3 security checks in the early game, and in the late game, if they don't have a whole lot of security, then he's just going to rip their security and potentially swing for lethal. So that's just what's making this card super good, is all of the different ways we could play him based on the different stages of the game that we're going to be in and what cards we have access to in any given moment. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Gaia Force. So Gaia Force is just another security threat to be playing around with, just because this card is that good of a security ability. So it has the security ability of activating its main, and its main ability allows us to delete one of the opponent's Digimon, and that's just really good. Getting Digimon off the field is just that important, so that way we could try to mitigate some of their threat and some of their potential damage. And as a result, I'm also going to be running 3 copies of Atomic Blaster for very similar reasons. It's just another very powerful removal option card to be running as a good security threat. So most of the time we don't necessarily want to be playing these from our hand, although sometimes we're forced to, and that's not necessarily bad because they're just still very powerful cards. But Atomic Blaster having the security ability of activating its main, and its main ability being we get to delete any number of the opponent's Digimon whose total DP adds up to 8,000, makes it just a very, very powerful removal ability to use because it could potentially pick off multiple different targets or one semi-large target. And then as far as our tamers go, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Marcus. So Marcus is going to be the deck's dedicated memory fixing tamer, which is really important because we're basing a lot of our plays on having at least 3 memory to work with. So Marcus, being that tamer that'll always set us to 3 if we're ever less than 3, is just really good, on top of the fact that it is interacting with our Greymons. So what this card is doing with our Greymons is when one of our Digimon with Greymon in its name attacks, then we get to gain a memory by suspending this tamer, allowing us to make some very powerful follow-up plays because now we're going to be gaining more memory to do potentially more things with. But as far as the main tamer of the deck goes, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Tai Kamiya. So this is the BT06 version of Tai Kamiya, and this card is absolutely insane just because of how powerful this card is. So it has two abilities. Its first ability is an ability that happens during your turn when a Digimon with Agumon or Greymon in its name is basically raised out from the raising area. Then we get to gain a memory and draw a card, adding to the overall consistency and power potential of the deck, because we're going to be able to dig through our cards to find our parts and pieces, on top of the fact that we're going to be gaining more memory to basically make more powerful plays happen. And then on top of that, the main ability, which is what we're primarily going to be using the card for, outside of its ability to try to help us draw cards and gain memory, is the fact that it's allowing us to warp into our Agumon Bond of Bravery off of any one of our Agumons. But if we do that, then we have to trash the top two cards of our security stack, and then if we have one or more cards in our security, then we have to delete the Digimon at the end of the turn. But that's okay, because what we're still trying to do is just chip the opponent out, and we're trying to damage race them, and we could very easily win that damage race because all of our cards are just super powerful and super aggressive. And if we don't have any security left, then we get to keep the Bond of Bravery on the field, which could act as a recursive threat and could really end games if left unchecked. And then the last tamer of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Analog Youth. So Analog Youth is an absolutely insane card for this style of deck to be playing around with because of all of its potential with what we can do with it. So it has a very powerful on-play ability where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck and then add any Digimon card among them into our hand and then trash the rest. So unfortunately, we do have to trash the rest, but that's where cards like Agumon Expert come in handy, where we could start trying to think about salvaging some of our cards. And then the fact that we still get to pick any one Digimon among the top 3 is still just very powerful and adding to the overall consistency of the deck. And then its second ability is also really, really powerful, because its second ability is an all turns ability, where if we have a level 5 or higher Digimon with Digivolution sources deleted, then we get to suspend this tamer, and then if we do, we get to gain a memory and hatch a Digi-Egg into an empty space in our raising area. So we're going to be using this ability aggressively more than defensively, just because we could swing with our SkullGreymon, have it get deleted, then that's going to trigger Analog Youth to basically gain a second raising phase. And then we could do that same style of play with Agumon Bond of Bravery, where we could warp up into him, swing, have him die at the end of the turn due to his own ability, then Analog Youth's ability will activate, gaining us the memory, and hatching another Digi-Egg to reload as quickly as we possibly can, making this card absolutely insane for us to use, for allowing us to try to keep up the pressure onto the opponent. And then there's still room for customization, improvements, and different tech options and packages that you could run in the deck to really customize it and make it your own. So if you really wanted to, you could also include a hybrid-based package inside of this deck, just because we're already playing with our tamers and trying to dig out our tamers, and we're already kind of playing into the hybrids a little bit, just to try to act as an alternate win condition, so we could go a little bit heavier on that strategy if you really wanted to, because it's not that bad of a tech option to include in the deck. So Flamon here just allows us to try to dig out our tamers and our hybrids, which isn't a bad thing because we kind of just want to see those cards anyway. And then we do have the brand new Flamon that's going to be giving our hybrids and 10 warriors piercing. So this just allows our hybrids to actually get the damage through more consistently. And we have some really powerful hybrids to think about utilizing, like Burning Greymon as just an alternate hybrid to use to Digivolve on top of our tamer with, in case we don't see Agunimon. And on top of that, he's going to make himself stronger by default by buffing himself by 3000 DP, making him a level 4 that's swinging for 9000 DP, potentially more, and we could even give him piercing. So he's just, again, another very aggressive card to think about utilizing. Then we do have the Agunimon to act as a solid warp point and try to make Digivolving into Ancient Greymon even cheaper. So we could hide this card in raising, move him out, swing, and warp Digivolve into Ancient Greymon to try to deal as much damage as we possibly can with. But if we don't feel like we need to do that, we could just consider running Aldemon, just because this Digimon will DP boost himself to 11,000 on top of him natively having Security Attack Plus. So it's just, again, another very aggressive early to mid-game card to try to chip and deal as much damage as we possibly can. And then, like I said, warping into Ancient Greymon isn't necessarily that bad, because Ancient Greymon can deal lots of damage depending on how we build his stack. So he's just another very good card to consider using for the chip potential, and he's actually a decent card to think about utilizing against decks like Security Control, just because his on-delete ability will allow him to replace himself. So whether he's deleted through the security checks or just deleted because of the ability, we still get a body out of him at the end of the day, and that's pretty good, allowing us to keep up the pressure. And then we even have cards like Atomic Inferno to think about to try to deal even more damage with our hybrids than we normally could, and we don't even necessarily have to use this with our hybrids. Just because it's targeting a hybrid Digimon, then we could Digivolve on top of the hybrid into something else, and I'll still retain the buffs. But the fact that we could use this card to deal extra damage just makes it very, very powerful for us to use against the opponent. Then we do have just a slew of other Agumons to think about utilizing. So we do have the BT05 Agumon to try to dig out our Greymons and Omnimons. Well, we're not really going to be running any Omnimons, so this is just good for trying to dig out our Greymons, but we do have lots of different Greymons that we want to be utilizing, making it not a bad card to try to see our mid-stage pieces. Then if you wanted to, you could even consider running the first promo Agumon, just because its on-play ability to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 3000 DP or less could just be that good, and we have multiple different ways of trying to play him out, so it's not like this is that bad of a card to think about trying to use. Then we do have the starter deck Agumon from the first red starter deck, just as a generic 1000 DP boost for any of our Digimon. Then as far as some of our other Greymons, we could run the BT03 Greymon, just because if we want to try to make our security as threatening as possible, then this card is just another security Digimon to act as another security threat, to pop out and to act as a surprise. And then we even have the BT05 Greymon. That's another really good card because it allows us to be tempo efficient with this card, allowing us to gain 1 memory back for Digivolving on top of a Agumon, which all of our rookies are Agumons currently, and it even has some solid interaction with our SkullGreymon, because it could give our SkullGreymon plus 2000 DP, or any other Greymons that we feel like utilizing in our level 5 slot if we actually are trying to utilize level 5s. Then as far as another really powerful champion to be running, we do have Deltamon, just because he is a level 4 with 7000 DP, making him one of the stronger champions to be playing around with. You could run other really powerful champions if you really felt like it, like Dark Tyrannomon, just because 1 to Evo 6000 DP is still pretty decent. I just prefer to try to utilize the Greymon line, just because it has some better synergy with the deck, but these generic champions aren't bad either. Then we do have some really interesting tech cards that we could consider running. So you could consider running Mechanorimon as just some solid defense or just a red blocker, but we also have access to Magnadramon, just because we are going to be damaging ourselves quite a lot, and we actually could utilize the heal to make our security as threatening as it possibly can, on top of trying to keep us in the game. So Magnadramon is a really powerful tech card to think about utilizing. And then speaking of powerful tech cards, we do have access to a Delicate Plan, because we are trying to check the opponent's security as much and as often as we possibly can. So a Delicate Plan could take away some potential security threats by turning their options off. Then we do have Trident Revolver to try to play our Tamers as efficiently as we possibly can, and act as another solid removal card. Then we even have Ties Growing Up, just because this card allows us to have access to some really decent levels of card draw for just basically getting rid of an Agumon as long as we have a tie on our field, which isn't hard because we already want to play ties and we already want to play Agumons, so having access to more card draw is never a bad thing. But speaking of card draw, we also have a red memory boost to act as, well, a solid memory boost card for the deck to use to try to make our plays more powerful and to try to make our deck more consistent, trying to dig out our parts and pieces as quickly and often as we possibly can. Then we also do have Lightning Joust if we do just want to try to deal more damage as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can, because again, we are going to be ending up damaging ourselves, and we could easily put our security lower than the opponent's security, so giving our cards more of a punch might not be a bad thing to think about. And then we also have the starter deck Tai Kamiya as just another really powerful tamer to be thinking about playing around with. So the fact that it's a really efficient tamer that's going to be DP boosting our Digimon, making them even more powerful and threatening, is never a bad thing, on top of the fact that it is a Tai Kamiya, so combined with BT06 Agumon, it is going to be a more efficient tamer to play than ever before. But for the most part, this is just my interpretation of a really solid foundation or base to use for the Agumon Bond of Bravery deck, just because there is a lot that could be played around with this deck depending on the different types of tech and tools that you want to be using and the different meta environments you could possibly be playing him in. But I do think thanks to the Classic Collection, there is just a lot of new possibilities to use in the deck, and it really makes the deck a very fun and exciting deck to play around with because of all of these new possibilities. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.